everybody. Very happy to introduce Louise Sharland.
Hi, everyone.
Who's going to start us off in an introduction to herself and her books.
Well, hi, I'm Louise Sharland. I am a fiction writer, short story writer, crime writer. I had 2 pieces in the national press in the last couple of days, and a short story in the Daily Express and one in Best Magazine. So I started off writing short fiction, and then it kind of emerged for me that a lot of my writing had a certain tension, and I thought, oh, I'm going to explore crime a little bit further. I also realized that a lot of women in my age group, 40 plus, write fiction. And it's a genre that is open to accepting women and men of, not just 20 in the 20s, but later than that. So it's one of the reasons I thought strategically I will look at writing crime. But my second book, it's called My Husband's Secrets, came out on Thursday, and I guess it is kind of in the domestic, known as the domestic noir genre, which is kind of about family situations. And in fact, my publishers were marketing it more as a family drama. And at first I was like, but do I want it to be crime? But I deferred to them because they're experts. And I thought they know what they're talking about. And actually, it's a good thing. I think it's opened up a really wide audience for me, just looking at some of the traffic on Twitter. So if you're a writer, I guess keep an open mind about genre and how your works are categorized. And the book is about a woman who it opens up with a kind of prologue of a very kind of graphic car accident, really dramatic, and then you see the fallout and the aftermath. And there's a lot of people not telling the truth. And as you read through the book, you're really trying to find out, unweave the webs and find out who's telling the truth, who isn't, and why. Caroline, is that enough of a overview, would you say? Everyone's got their own agenda, I think, but not maliciously. They're all just a bit messed up, I think.
Yeah, they all have their own kind of issues around what's happened, don't they? And then it's about them kind of exploring that and unraveling what happened on the day, because your memories of such a traumatic event can get mixed up.
They can. And I don't think there's no real baddies. There's different level of people that are duplicitous. I think one reviewer said, "Oh, I'm not sure if I could really like the characters," and I deliberately didn't necessarily want to write likable characters. I wanted to write real characters, people with complex lives and issues, and how they kind of work through them. So yeah, sort of. So Caroline, any questions for me?
So I do, and I'm going to start off just by saying how much I like both of your books.
Oh, thank you.
So far, they're marvelous.
I've got the first one, The Lake.
Yeah, The Lake was my introduction to you.
Yeah, that one was interesting. I wrote that. It's about a mother who's 5 years after the death of her teenage son, she finds a rucksack with a burner phone and a diary, and she starts to believe his death wasn't an accident, and she becomes obsessed with it, with finding out what really happened. And I think what surprised me is people saying how sad it was, because of course there was a lot of grief tied into it, which I hadn't really realized. So it's really nice to hear comments from people, just like your wonderful review, but comments make you go, oh gosh, I hadn't really thought about that, or I didn't realize that people were perceiving it that way. And that's like a really wonderful added bonus to getting your work out there, really. Or like my father-in-law said, it's a bit girly. And I was like, no, I'm writing about women's fiction.
I think the tricky thing, though, that when that comes down to it, is when you interview an author who writes novels like you can have so many questions in your head for you about like your books and things, but it's very hard to like think about what questions you can ask without giving away a spoiler. And I said that in my review. It's really hard to like write a review without giving away a spoiler.
Hello, everyone who's online. Thank you for joining, for coming along. I guess what I've really found, Caroline, in my writing and in my planning is I really like putting in things like Easter eggs and little clues like in chapter 2 and following it up in chapter 10. And I really like misdirection. So you think that someone does that and then I misdirect to something else. I find that really fun. And it takes a lot of planning because I have like a grid. When I went to a recent crime writing festival and they talked about pantsers or planners. So pantsers are writers that write by the seat of their pants and just sit down and write. And then planners kind of plan out there. So I used to be someone who just would sit down, but then when you have less than a year to write a book, when you have a contract, you better have a plan pretty much. So I have a sort of grid where I say in chapter 2, do this and link it up to chapter 10. And that's quite fun. And I hope readers enjoy kind of picking out those Easter eggs and going, oh yeah, I remember in chapter 2. So that's really what I like doing in my next book. So I was just saying to Caroline before we went live, my next book is it's not really more procedural, but it's about a probation officer whose clients are being murdered and she kind of gets pulled into that. So there's slightly more procedure. I used to work with ex-offenders. I used to work with probation services. So I was really fascinated by how the risk works, but really more about their compassion.
Yeah, we talked about this, didn't we, the other
Yeah.
day when we did the promo, because I've worked with kind of offenders and things, but as youth.
So yeah, but I think I mentioned to you previously, Caroline, as well, that the second book. So the first book I wrote over 5-6 years on and off. I was doing an MA. I was working. I was just enjoying writing. And the second book, that I had a very clear structure deadline. So I had to write it a lot more quickly, and I had about 3 rewrites. This was written about over 9 months, and I had a fantastic editor, Molly Walker Sharp at Avon Books, and some really great copy editors. But my first draft, I tend to go way over the top. I think in my next book, my first version had someone being handcuffed to an aga. It's just like, how terrible is that? So first drafts are pretty out there, and then I start then reviewing, paring them back, and really fine tuning. But writing the second book, I felt a lot more insecure. Maybe that's a normal thing. I don't know any other writers out there who've experienced that. But so I wasn't sure. I really wasn't sure about it, even though there's times I felt, yeah, this is working. This is good. So having that validation is really important and useful and reassuring. And I think it's just one of those things, where sometimes I'll have that little bit of imposter syndrome. But
so one thing I noticed in both books, you have kind of links to quite isolated communities. So you have like I want to call them a cult in the first book.
Yeah.
And then like sort of a commune type
Yeah.
thing. Is that something that fascinates you, or?
Well, I think in the first book, it's a group called the Plymouth Brethren, which are sort of a fundamentalist. I would agree. I would call them a cult personally. There are quite a few in Plymouth. I noticed where I live in Plymouth, and I noticed them. I was really curious about them, and I did some research. It's similar to groups where if you don't follow the doctrine, then you're disfellowshipped or you're ostracized, and the people don't have the kids aren't allowed to study science. They're not allowed to go on to university education, no television, no friends from outside communities. So if they wanted to leave or question the authority, they have nowhere to go. So that was really interesting. I think with the commune, I can't remember, I think I do have a fascination, but it was also about isolating people so they have no one to go to. So you're ramping up the pressure, putting people. What interests me is why normal good people do bad things, and how, I guess you must know this as well from working with ex-offenders is how, and I worked with homeless people, and honestly, 3 paychecks and you're on the street, and I would always think there, but for the grace of God, go I, because it's so easy for that to happen. So in my writing, I'm looking at ramping up the pressure as to why people would behave in ways they wouldn't normally. And even, I mean, you only have to look at the news to see when violent acts happen. I was thinking, just made me think of that situation, must have been 5 or 6 years ago, where the neighbors had the argument over the Leyland Day, and one of them shot the other, and just the pressure. So I'm really interested in the psychology of behavior and how and why people do things like that. I'm just looking at Samantha's notes. I didn't write it in too much detail. I just again, it was about isolating the main character. It was about her being vulnerable and establishing a really close friendship. It was, I think, if you're writing crime, maybe more than kind of general fiction or kind of literary fiction, you're using situations and characters and relationships for a very particular reason. So it's all plot driven, and characters are important, and we could have an argument about character or plot. But I wanted to have my main character, Ali, as being quite vulnerable. She moves from London to rural Devon and comes from a kind of commune, and you see them. I'm thinking of an area near us called Totnes, and this is not a kind of comment on that lifestyle. It's a brilliant lifestyle for a lot of people. But for the Ali, she was isolated. She went to a state secondary school, and that made her vulnerable. And that contributed to a very, very close friendship. So it was really a technical, strategic tool I used. With the first book, I did a lot of research into Plymouth Brethren because I was generally curious about how that works and how women are confined in those kind of environments, I felt. Yeah.
You're very good at building tension in your books. I think I drew a reference to Shirley Jackson.
Oh my gosh.
Really good at like terrifying you with nothing happening. And I think
I'm so flattered. Thank you.
I think there's a moment in like the most recent one where she finds a missing jacket, and it's just really kind of creepy and suspenseful, and it's just a missing jacket.
Thank you. I am Shirley Jackson. Wow, I'm really, that's hang on to that one. I wrote a piece for a website called Female First, where they asked me about how I feel about secrets, and I thought quite a bit about it. And I'm the child of alcoholics. I grew up in a pretty violent, unsafe environment. So when I wrote about it, and I did a workshop I work at Plymouth College of Arts, now the Arts University Plymouth. It's now got university status. And I was working with film students doing a creative writing session. And I said, if you grow up in a violent household or an unsafe household, you understand threat. You understand threat explicitly and implicitly. So I think that's where I kind of get that sense of, everything looks okay, but under the surface, there's kind of tension bubbling up. So that's something that I incorporate into my writing because I'm in a good place about it now. But I think, it's something I explore. And I think a lot of my ideas come from questions. So I'll have a question in my head and I think, I wonder what's that about? And I wonder how that would happen and what would happen there. And that's kind of the impetus behind what gets me going. And I've just had a couple of good ideas in my head when I was doing the washing up. So washing up is good. No, it isn't, but
you're on with book 3. Do you want to tell us a little bit more, if you can tell us a little bit more?
Yeah. So I wrote it as part of my MA. So I did an MA in crime writing at the University of East Anglia, and we had to write a novel. So that's the one my first draft had the main character handcuffed to a naga. I just think, could you have anything more middle class? But it's about a probation officer who her guys are being murdered, and she becomes a sort of amateur detective. She's pulled in that. But what I wanted to explore, I'm quite interested in looking at tropes and themes in crime fiction, is I was a bit fed up of the old trope of the women being murdered, particularly Scandi noir. If you look at a lot of Scandi noir, there's a lot of, I was watching The Chestnut Man on Netflix, there's a lot of mutilation of women being murdered, or you see the opening, you read the opening. What was the one? There's another one where they get off the bus or they get out of the pub. There's a white van there, and the next day the dismembered female bodies in the field. And I thought, no, I'm going to flip it. I'm going to explore this. And so in my book, sorry, chaps, but it's the men being murdered. And I was really pleased that my tutor recognized that I was looking to explore that. Oh, Donna, fantastic question. So I've got to tell you this great story. Years and years ago, I was thinking of, and I do have some bad ideas, I'm going to be honest. I was thinking of writing about someone who's a forager and collects mushrooms to poison someone. So I emailed a professor of chemistry at the University of Plymouth, and I said, is this possible? Can you distill mushrooms into a powder form? And he came back with the exact chemical formula and the exact amount it would take to kill a man. Email. I thought, yeah, that's pretty interesting. I found out loads. I did some research into forensic accountancy, into Forex trading. I know how to kill someone without being detected. I'm not going to tell you how, but I do. So it's really interesting. I think that's the most interesting thing. Rabbit hole. I think it was in my husband's secrets, I was quite interested in, so Forex trading is basically when you buy foreign currency, it's essentially online gambling, really. Buy it at a low interest rate and then wait and try to sell it. Buy it and trying to sell it when it goes even lower. So you're making money off. Yeah, so it goes high, you sell it high, buy low, sell high. But it's essentially high risk. So I spent a lot of time researching that, and I didn't use that much of it in the book, but it was I spoke to a forensic accountant who worked with fraudsters, but it's still quite interesting. So I do like my research. I need to kind of understand something at a reasonable level to write about it. And that's why I don't write procedural, because even though I worked with police, and I was an independent custody visitor for a while, so I used to go in to visit people in custody to make sure their rights were being observed. So you get a feel of how that works. But I do enjoy research. I really love setting. I'm really interested in setting as a character, kind of creating tension and mood and a kind of subtext. So I guess the Forex trading, a lot of time, I didn't use that much of it. And I know a few ways to kill people. My husband knows that too, so he better behave.
So, what's the challenges like for writing book 3 then? Because both of your other two are kind of a really small, like, community of people that are all sort of directly affected by what's happened. How is that expanding out? I love Donna's commenting. How is that expanding out to like?
So, Donna, guess what we're having for tea tonight? Mushroom risotto. Oh, sorry, Caroline, go on.
How is it like writing book 3 with like a slightly bigger cast? Because I would imagine she's going out and investigating. There's going to be people that she doesn't know.
Good question. So it's a really good question. So there's a level of, and I think part of how I did that is when I watch Silent Witness, I quite often think she's the pathologist. She wouldn't be out in a gun battle, you know? So what she's doing is she has her job where she does her procedural. And to be honest, a lot of probation work is paperwork. It's about risk. So all the extra investigation she's doing in secret. So she's doing it below the wire. At one point, she's to sneak in places. So that isolates her as well. So she can't be, even though she's in a big city, she's still on her own. And it is a theme I really explore in pretty much all my books. So she isolates herself from her friends, her family, because of her kind of obsession to find the truth. So that even within a large city or large community, she's on her own because she can't tell anyone about what's happening because she's essentially behaving illegally herself. So that's how I do it in that instance, I think. Yeah.
Cannot wait to read it.
You're going to be one of my first readers because you're going to tell me what works and what doesn't. But yeah, I'm looking at a series, pitching it as a series as well. So it's a really great. It's really interesting, and I don't toot my own horn very often. I really don't. And it's taken me many years to kind of recognize. I know, kind of understand who I am as a writer. I know I'm not a genius, but I'm okay. But in the next book, when you hear a lot from agents and publishers, is we want an original voice, and we want this voice. And I think my character, Sarah, is actually, I worked with a student whose surname was Midwinter, and I thought that's such a good name, so I used it because it's not based on the student. But so the sense of this character, real character with a real kind of wry humor comes across. So I guess for writers out there, there's no shortcuts. Just keep on doing it. Keep on getting it right. Keep on getting it wrong. And you will get there. That's my best advice, I think. I'm trying to think of, I've just been doing it a long time. So there's no magic solution. I just say keep on doing it. Know what you do well. So when I first started writing, I thought, well, I need to write more kind of metaphorically and use imagery. And it's not really what I do best. So I incorporate it a little bit. But when you write, the more you write, the more feedback you get, you start to understand your strengths, and then you play to them.
So you're pitching this one as a series?
Yeah.
Is that going to come out with Avon as well?
I don't know. So I had a 2-book deal with Avon. I won the big issue crime writing competition in a 2-book deal. So it's really up to Avon if they want to. I have an agent, so it would come through my agent. But I also am writing another book with a friend, which is really interesting, another family drama, which we're playing around with Ancestry.com. So it's going to have a little bit of references to that. And I've got a couple of ideas. Working in an art college or art university, I have a couple of ideas incorporating that. So we'll see. I'll leave that to my wonderful agent I can't believe I can say that. I'm an agent. But I loved working with Avon. They were amazing, amazing group of people, really intimate group of women, and anyone out there who's looking to get publishers, they do publish without an agent, and I would be following them on Instagram because they do have days where you can just send your manuscript, open days. So I would definitely keep them on your radar. They do such a variety as well.
That sounds like a really good tip.
Yeah, so I'm hoping. I think when they did look at that Vengeance Street for my second book, but it is slightly more kind of procedural. I think they wanted a psychological fiction, but we'll see how it goes. I'm just having a look at some of the comments here. Hi, Sam. So first draft. So my husband's secrets, I did 3 drafts. Pretty significant. Changed the murderer. As I said, I tend to go really slightly crazy over the top in the first draft, slightly cuckoo bananas. And so it's great to have an editor or beta readers to tell, oh, that's not believable. And then now that I know that, I'm going to allow myself to write over the top for the first draft and then pare it back. So the same with my redraft of Vengeance Street, A New Murderer, but not significant changes. I don't know how you write out there. I would use a 3-act structure. So, beginning, rising action, tension, middle, builds more and more, and then end, denouement. And so the 3rd act is going to end completely. So quite a bit changes, I guess. Yeah. So keep an open mind. If it works, it certainly worked for me. But again, the more you write, the more you understand yourself. And now I know, yeah, I'm going to go big first draft, and then I'm going to refine it.
Aggie asked you if the idea for a series was yours or your agent's.
Well, I know that agents, a series means successful publishing for a significant period. I'm thinking I'm a real fan of Louise Penny, who writes the Inspector Jamarche series set in Quebec, where I was born. And I think she's got 15 books now in the series, close to that. So a bit of both. I suggested it. And then she said, "Oh, good idea." And then she said, "Oh, can you come up with 2 more ideas for 2 more books?" And I thought, I don't have ideas for 2 more books. So
now you've done the washing up.
so, but yeah, when you read it, you'll see. I think it's got potential for series, and I think this stuff's really visual as well. I'd love to see it on screen. So hopefully that will happen at some point.
Tell us a bit about the book you're writing with your friend.
So it is. The working title is called Bloodlines, and it's about 2 people who are not directly related, but as you know, through ancestry, I know a few people who, through doing the DNA element of it, have found out that they're not related to the people they thought they were related to. So they kind of discover that they're related, and that leads to a kind of early trauma and a crime. So we're still just in the early stages of working that out.
Sounds good though.
Yeah.
Have you been doing your own family history research to get?
I haven't. I wouldn't mind. So my father was born in Wales, so I could probably find that out relatively easy. But my mother was born in Quebec, she's Quebecois, and her maiden name was Valancourt. And I always wonder if, that they would have been back from Louis, the kind of immigrants. And I wonder if there's any connection to any kind of, not French royalty, I don't know, if they were very much lower middle class rural Quebecers. But I'd be quite interested to find out, to trace that back to France. It'd be quite interesting. But no, I haven't. Have you?
My dad did ours. He managed to trace his side back to not very far, but we have a highwayman in the family.
Oh,
he was living in Edinburgh, and he traced my mum's back really easily because she lived in East Anglia and is about the only person to have left. So he traced her back to, like, on my mum's side, our family history goes back to, like, Ethelred.
Wow, that is cool. I think it's really interesting. It does give you a sort of grounding. I might do it.
So it's pretty interesting.
Yeah. Just having a look at Donna's question. Gosh, characters. That's a good question. I don't think it might be Ali in My Husband's Secrets. I think in the first draft, she was really unlikable. And I had to, because she's going through a lot and she's quite driven and she's quite traumatized. So that was coming out in sort of spiky behavior. I had to make her slightly more likable so the reader could empathize a bit with what she's going through. Because she, like in all my books, all my characters sometimes do dubious things under pressure. So you need to get the reader on side before you take them. And I think in The Lake, the main character, Kate, one of the things I wanted to show is she becomes so obsessed with finding the truth about what happened to her son. She kind of becomes morally corrupted because of that obsession. I'm really interested in that. So I think, again, with My Husband's Secrets, the rewrite, like they say that the real writing's in the rewriting, and I can't emphasize that enough. That's where the real magic happens. So first, sorry, go on.
I was going to say, I think for me, one of the things that makes your books a 5-star read, and I'm fairly sure I've given both of them 5 stars, is the characters, because they are just genuinely like real human beings. So they're not always like likable, but you can kind of understand why they're not likable or why they've made that decision, and they feel like real people. So you're really drawn into the book and what happens, and I think that helps with the tension building and things as well, because you genuinely believe that people would behave that way.
Thank you. I think that's what I'm always looking to. There was a great post on your Facebook page about someone talking about getting a bit fed up with the series, where the character was so messed up. She thought, how do they how could this person function? You know, which I thought was brilliant, really brilliant post. And it wasn't personalized either. It was just about her opinion about that kind of writing in general, which I thought was great. But yeah, I think I will always write characters that you want to root for, but aren't always noble. Because as human beings, we're not always noble, aren't we? We're just human. We get it right sometimes, we get it wrong sometimes. And I think that comes from my own experience and from working with people who've gone through some really tough times in their lives and have made bad choices, but they're still good people.
And I think if you're showing like a family drama, so the start of My Husband's Secrets, it's not giving anything away, has them in a car kind of coming back. They've both made a kind of dodgy decision because they both had a bit to drink, and they're driving back. They're having a bit of a row because they're a married couple, you know.
Yeah.
And it feels like, you know, there's probably hundreds of couples that have done that.
Yeah.
And it just doesn't end well for them.
And it's that thing that does fascinate me. And I've really tried in my later years to embrace, just to be grateful every day, you know, that life, things can happen in a flash. Tragedy can happen no matter how good a person you are or how bad a person is. So I really try to embrace gratitude and just think, oh, my family's safe, my kids are safe, things are okay today, you know, because life can just be so unpredictable. And I guess that's what I'm exploring in my books, in a way too. Yeah.
We talked about you working at Plymouth College of Arts.
It's now Arts University. Yeah.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
Do you teach creative writing there?
No, I am a careers advisor. So I work with artists every day, amazing artists. So, but I use a lot of language. So they're visual artists. I can't tell them how to paint, but what I do is tell them how to articulate the practice for things like commissions, residencies, competitions, do artist statements. And sometimes they'll sit and tell me about their project work. I had I still think I told you this story already, Caroline, but a student who sat down and said, well, I'm growing mushrooms in my basement, and I'm going to take the mushroom spores and I'm going to make it into material. So I'm going to make it into like really hard material, and then I'm going to build a life-size replica of an artist's shed. So I'm going to make a building out of mushroom material. And I was like, wow, you know. So let's talk about how you're going to write about that, how you're going to get funding for that. So that's what I do. It's just wonderful. And I get to wander around. We've got like a kiln. There's ceramics workshops. It's just amazing. So it does. But I do teach. I do occasionally go in and teach creative writing. So I did some sessions with film, and I do occasionally do some lunchtime writing workshops. And over lockdown, I did a lunchtime writing workshop. So something I'd love to do more of. I am actually doing, if anyone's in the Southwest, a workshop for Plymouth City Library on the 9th of July. So I'm just doing a general workshop on creative writing. And I'm really someone that tries to get people to get out of that internal editor, the critic. And I do a lot of kind of free association, free writing exercises, prompts to avoid, because we've all been there where you go, oh, you write a line, you go, that's terrible. Well, really try and get people just to get things down. So, yeah.
So before we move on, make sure you post that workshop link into the group and say I've approved it.
Okay.
There will be members that live in
fantastic
that area.
I don't know if it's been publicized yet, but it will be at Plymouth Central Library. It's free. And I'm just saying if anyone wants to make donations to the Ukrainian Relief Fund, that would be great. But yeah, so that'll just be really fun, easygoing, and it could be poetry, it could be fiction, it could be life writing. Just having a look at Samantha's questions. What do you think makes reading about secrets and lies so fascinating? Well, again, I'm just going back to that article I wrote and I'm not trying to pitch that article, by the way. It's just that it got me thinking about that question exactly. And I thought about, what is it? And I wrote survival and shame, secrets, people lie. For me, I was talking about survival to, shut the windows, put the dresser in front of the door, those kind of secrets, and shame because you know that you're not in a normal environment. So I think that's really interesting. I think secrets, it's about understanding, it's about shame, don't you think? I think secrets are a lot of the time about shame, and we want to know about how people work. Lies. I don't know. It's such a good question. But I think it's about understanding people. It's about getting an insight, and it's about having that little bit of that insight and confidential information that maybe no one else knows. And if someone's hiding something, you want to know why. That's what I want to know. You want to know. And when I meet people and they behave in ways that I question, that I may not be pleasant, I always go, I wonder why they're behaving that way. What's the motivation? What has made them be that kind of person? So that interests me. It's the same with secrets and lies.
I think it's just understanding how people tick, isn't it?
Yep. And why, what's happened in their situation that they feel that they have to hide something. And there's lots of good reasons for secrets. And lies, I think, are about, depending on, lies can be malicious. But I think a lot of it is to do with shame. And what is it about shame? What makes us be shameful? Which is quite interesting. Is it about society? Is it about our upbringing? Is it about our own perceptions of ourselves? I think shame is a really interesting concept that maybe I'll look at that. Actually, I'm sort of looking at that in the book 2 of the Vengeance Street series, looking at shame. So, and I'm just looking at Sam's question again. Are there certain points that you revisit most with your creative writing students? My big thing is to get that first draft out there, whether it's just doing a 10-minute exercise, is to really try and avoid that critic. Just enjoy the process, be free, and see what happens. Not worry about spelling or grammar. Just try to get something and connect with your own style and process. And working with artists is really great because artists do that all the time. They're always looking at their process, their inspiration. So for me, that's what I'd be saying to anyone out there who wants to explore their writing further, is to really get in touch with how you write, what you want to write. Don't worry about what you think you should be writing, what trends are coming, because by the time you write your book, the trends passed. Just be authentic. And I think it's really tough publishing at the moment. I think publishers are really cautious, but if you're authentic, then you can always be proud of what you've achieved with your work. For me, that's the most important thing.
Very good advice.
Yeah.
What have you read this year that you've really enjoyed?
What I read is We Start at the End. I don't know if you read that. I really enjoyed it. That was sort of, I can't remember who wrote it now, sort of literary fiction. I am now reading one called, and he's a Finnish writer, but his name's Antti, I can't pronounce his surname, it's called The Rabbit Factor. I saw him at Crime Fest, and it's about a insurance actuary who inherits a adventure playground from his dead brother, and criminals are involved. So I'm reading that. I'm also reading non-crime. I'm reading Ariadne, and I'm quite interested in this new take on Chris. Thank you. Thanks, Emma. I loved it. I really loved it because there's a sort of literary quality to it. And I've also read my classmates, so Anthony Dunford's Hunted, and Judy, oh, I'm going to forget everyone's name now. Judy Dakin's, I'm going to forget everyone's name. So I've read my UEA classmates' books. But I'm quite interested in the kind of post-feminist view on the Greek myths, how they're looking at. One of my favorite books of all time is The Mists of Avalon, where they look at the Arthurian legend from the point of view of the women, and they're not all either lame or evil. They're powerful, though Guinevere is still always a bit lame in any depiction, to be honest. But so I'm going to be looking at reading a little bit more of those. There's another book. It's not Ariadne. There's another one that's kind of like a post-feminist vision of Greek myths. So I'm quite interested in that at the moment.
There was Margaret Atwood's one, wasn't there? She wrote the Penelopiad. It was like the women from the Odyssey.
That's it, Anti-Tumenin. Yeah, I'm really enjoying it, Donna. It's really funny and wry, and there's some great authors actually at Crime Fest, and he was one that particularly stood out for me. And Anne Cleeves was there, and she was just lovely. She was just a wonderful, generous person. Really liked her. I mean, I love her writing anyway, but she seems like someone who loves what she does. Sorry, you were saying?
There's the Penelopiad by Margaret Atwood.
I haven't read that, and I'm a huge Atwood fan. I think Alias Grace is one of my favorite. Alias Grace, and the other one, The Blind Assassin. That's one of my favorite Margaret Atwood books.
I love Margaret Atwood. I'm quite a fan of the Oryx and Crake.
That's some earlier stuff, isn't it? Yeah. So to be honest, I haven't read as much as I would like to. I find it quite difficult to read when I'm writing, and that's why I was kind of looking at some books that were not crime as a kind of just a step back to clear my head. So if anyone has any good recommendations, how about you, Caroline? What are you reading at the moment?
I don't know what I'm reading at the moment. I'm reading Sabine Durant, but I've literally just started it.
Yeah.
My favorite book of the year so far is Lessons in Chemistry.
Right, I'm going to write that down.
I absolutely loved it. It was one of those where I got to the end and I felt sad that I'd finished and I wanted to start again.
That's real. I'm just going to write that down. That reminds me of
reading it under a pile of other things because I've got things I need to read for author chats.
Yeah.
If I left it out, I would have just started again.
I'm gonna check that out. I'm gonna get that. There was another book I read years ago, and it's one of the earliest ones that looked at the body farm, the kind of forensic stuff. It was called The Chemistry of Death, which is quite
by Simon Beckett.
Yeah, that was a really good one.
His books are great.
Yeah. So yeah, but I really need to pick up my reading. So I shall be doing that. I'm gonna get lessons in chemistry.
It is not crime, it's just I don't really know how to explain it. It's great though.
Oh, I'll read it.
Are you so you're doing Plymouth Library? Any other author events that you've got coming up?
Not really. I haven't really, and I know I've seen other people where they do books. I might be doing something at the library where I work at our library and have like a little book launch. But I am going to the HarperCollins summer party at the V&A in June, which will be really interesting. I was really debating because I get a little bit anxious about those kind of shoo events, and it's going up to London for a day, which is exorbitant to stay over. But my daughter said, how often is that going to happen to get to go to and have a party at the V&A? So I'm doing that in June, but I haven't planned any other events. I love doing them. So I hopefully, as I get a little bit more known, I could run workshops at literary festivals, events. If there's anything in Leeds, let me know. I'll come and do it. But not all festivals have workshops. It seems to be. I mean, I know the purpose of a festival is to promote books and things, but I love ones where you can go and do a couple of hours, doing a writing
I
workshop.
was just thinking that Leslie Lloyd has just said something that I was just thinking. You're going to the HarperCollins summer party. Jenny O'Brien, one of our group authors, who was an all-around lovely lady.
Oh, Jenny, yay!
And feeling really nervous about it.
Oh, can you put me into, or can you give her my email address? Because I will. That would be so nice to meet her beforehand and go in.
If you tell me your email address, I'll pass it along to her.
Yeah,
It's really nice.
I'll stick it in the DM you and give you my email address. That would be really cool.
Yay.
Yeah.
I feel like we're making friendships happen.
Well, it can be such an isolating kind of thing, writing on your own, but I love it. I really enjoy doing it. Sometimes I'm not as disciplined as I should be. A deadline really gets me motivated. But and that's when I found I haven't been to Harrogate. I think next year I'm going to try and get to Harrogate. But there's so many festivals around now, particularly crime festivals. A couple I really love to do is Bloody Scotland as well. So I'll say
I really want to go to Bloody Scotland.
Yeah, it looks really good, doesn't it? And I mean, Stirling in autumn would be lovely, wouldn't it? So, yeah.
Very much.
No, I haven't really planned any kind of blog tours or things. I'm not quite sure how to do that. And I guess I lack a bit of confidence in that area. So it's maybe something I need to work on and see. Maybe I'll speak to other writers and see how they do it.
So, have you lost my train of thought now? Yeah, Bloody Scotland's going to be hybrid again.
Oh, that's good. That would be good. That would be great. I might do that then, because I would really like to go up there. But it's a journey, isn't it? So.
Well, it's a journey for me, and you live even further away.
Yeah. Would be a flight, at least. Sorry, you're going to say something.
That's nice though, flying up. I always think that's really fun, kind of flying internally places. It's like the best, because it's like when you fly away on holiday, it's kind of, you expect to go somewhere kind of really fun, don't you? But flying kind of in the UK is a bit like,
this feels like you're kind of, I'm an exec. Though interestingly, if you flew it takes longer to fly from Toronto to Vancouver than from England to Toronto, because Canada is so big, which is really interesting.
That is really interesting.
Yeah, let's see. Sam, is there any subject you would like to know more about for book research? Well, it's interesting because I collect people. So my husband and I started doing archery just for fun. And he'd done it already. So I had to go do an induction course, which was 6 weeks. It's great in a school hall, just shooting recurve bows, really fun. And the woman next to me, where we, 3 or 4 weeks in, I said, "Oh, what do you do?" She said, "Oh, I'm a crime scene investigator." I go, "Can I have your email address, please?" So I just collect people. As I said, I got forensic accountant, probation officer, retired detective. I met a Met policewoman who was going to go into anti-terrorism. I'm not going to write about terrorism, but always good. I think the area I wouldn't mind to know a little bit more about would be pathology. So to find someone that we could talk to about pathology and postmortems and things like that is probably, though again, I don't really do that level of research, but there's elements when your character, particularly in the next book, talks about how they died. I want to make sure that stuff is right. And there's just some things that you can't ask people about. That is really sensitive. You can't just email your local coroner or your pathologist. Aggie, what's one thing that you would never write about? So in the next book, I'm writing about the people that are being murdered are sex offenders, but they're not pedophiles. I'm not going to touch on that. It's too sensitive. It's too delicate. It's too painful. Oh my gosh, you guys are so useful. I should have done this ages ago. No, I'm not. I don't believe I'm not going to exploit. So I thought about, I think about that terrible thing that happened in Plymouth, the incel, the shootings. I'm not going to write about that. I'm quite often inspired by situations that have really happened and the questions they put in my head, but I'm not going to, I make sure that they're not directly relatable to a person or a situation, because real pain and real tragedy has happened. So I will always fictionalize it. I won't exploit. I will not write about women being exploited.
There was a while ago, thinking about Donna's question, a show by the guy who have you seen the man who does the way of preserving the bodies with the
Yes, the German chap.
Yeah, Dr. von Hagens. He's got his own art exhibition, hasn't he? He did a show on Channel 4 where he talked about the workings of the body and actually almost did a post-mortem on the video. He'd go into the body and just show you different body systems.
And it's quite interesting. I mean, I find it really fascinating. I stayed with again, I've collected someone else. I've got an email. And when I stayed in Crime Fest, I stayed at Airbnb, and the chap who owned the Airbnb was a filmmaker, and he just recorded students at British Royal Infirmary doing autopsies. So I should email him. Oh, wow. Donna, you're so... Oh, really? Is that like the show Postmortem Live? That's kind of like was it actually fantastic. So I think that's one area. Normally when I'm writing a book, as I said, like with the Forex Trading, I've got it in, and with the Plymouth Brethren, when I get an idea. And the next book, I'm not going to mention what it is, but it is to do, the question in the book, the second Vengeance Street book, is about, is it objectification or is empowerment? That's going to be the question in that book. So it's to do with women and websites. That's all I'm going to say. So are women empowered, or are they still, is it still objectification? So
sounds interesting.
Yeah. Would you ever write in different genres? Well, I write short fiction. So I had a piece in Best magazine this week, and it was lighthearted. So it was kind of lighthearted, light fiction, women's fiction. I wrote a young people's dystopia, young adult dystopia, which was never published. I probably wouldn't go back to that now because there's so many people doing it so much better than me. So, and I first kind of started, one of my two favorite writers are probably Anne Tyler and Carol Shields. And that kind of slice of life, but that look at the minute exploration of families and how we live. So maybe that's kind of where my interest in characters comes from. So that's where I started writing. And then again, just naturally, because the tension and the kind of tense situations came up in my writing, I thought I was going to explore crime and psychological fiction. So yeah, I would be probably literary-ish, but I've written a couple of sci-fis, short stories. I wrote one called 7 Seconds of Snow, which is about the climate change. And I was telling Caroline before we started, I did a residential writing course where you have like crits, how you sit around and you read pieces and you're supposed to get constructive feedback. That's the whole point. You get other writers kind of saying this worked for me and this didn't. And someone just said, "Oh, I hate eco fiction." And I thought, well, where does that it doesn't offer me anywhere to go. If they said, okay, it's not my thing, but I really appreciated that character, but I didn't believe that bit, at least I could go somewhere with it. But yeah, I try different things, but I don't know. I think at some point I'd like to write a sort of maybe moving more into the kind of family drama area, which with this book, as I said, I was kind of like when my publisher said that's what we're going to go, I was like, oh, really? But it's really opened up an audience for me and opened up new opportunities for me as a writer. So I guess I'm not going to limit myself.
Good advice.
Yeah.
The joy me and Sam have, and though she's just had more books to read, is that you learn from doing these author interviews that actually you shouldn't limit yourself. You shouldn't say there are sort of genres that you wouldn't read.
Yeah.
You know your niche of things that you like to read, but actually, like, I read a lot of stuff now that I wouldn't pick up and go and buy like in a bookstore, but because I'm interviewing them, I'll read a book.
Absolutely.
And I found things I've really enjoyed that I wouldn't have.
You probably made some great discoveries. I bought a book called a few years ago called The Knowledge, which is a book about how to rebuild the world after a catastrophe. And right from how to make a water purifier to how to build like a generator. Because I have this kind of fascination with post-apocalyptic world. I don't know how that happened. It's not like there's anything to reference it at the moment, but so I read things like that as well. I do like kind of nonfiction stuff as well, and factual based stuff too. So yeah, don't limit yourself.
No, definitely not. And you should definitely all, if you're watching this, go and buy Louise's books because they have.
Hold them off like I should do.
I get my rare 5-star reviews.
Yeah, well, I mean, I was just blown away by that, and I know you don't do it as a favor. I know that's you as a professional, so it means a lot. And yeah, I'm really pleased, and thank you for having me. And I'm just going to crack on and keep going. It's really nice. As I've said it many times before, I'm the 30-year overnight success. So just keep on writing, everybody. Keep on reading and just enjoy.
And you need to stay in touch because next time you would get an interview with Sam.
Yes, I will. I mean, I will. You'd always be. It's a shame I couldn't run. I mean, maybe we could look at doing an online workshop for some of your readers if we could do that. Maybe if there's people that we could get a small group and do it through Zoom or something, I could run a crime writing workshop for people. I'd be happy to do that. So that's something we can look at if you think that's a possibility.
Yep.
Yep.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, well, it's a pleasure. It's always nice to chat. Caroline and I always chat beforehand, and we just keep on finding things that we have in common before we chat, don't we?
No, we do. Show off your books again before we finish.
Okay, this is the lake, and this is my mother-in-law. Actually, texted me, said I preferred my husband's secrets to the lake, and I said, well, thank you. Well, my father-in-law said they're a bit girly, which is not true.
No.
But I just take that with a grain of salt. It's that whole debate about everyone has an opinion. And you just need to kind of say, well, thanks for your opinion, but thank you for your opinion. But yeah, let me know. Anyone watching, if you're interested in a workshop, let Caroline know and we'll see if there's something we can do online. Fab. Have a great Sunday evening, everybody. And thank you for inviting me. And hopefully we'll see you all again soon.
Thank you for the books and the chat.
Thank you. Take care.